Right, well, welcome everyone. I'm Felton Thomas. I'm the director of the Cleveland Public Library and the chair of DPLA. And I won't keep us very long because we have a lot of speakers today, and I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak. But I do want to make sure that all of our folks who are participating with us today have an opportunity to ask questions. So we will be keeping it to the time to make sure at 1:45 we give at least 15 minutes for question and answer and discussion. So with that, I am going to turn it over to John Bracken, our fearless Executive Director of the Digital Public Library of America, and he will get us started.
Good afternoon. I see people coming in as we're talking, and we will identify when we get to the question and answers bit. We'll make sure to put a spotlight on the DPLA board members. I'll give you guys a quick overview of some of the things we're up to, and actually, Suzanne, if you're there, maybe you can throw the agenda into the chat if you haven't already. I'm going to ask Dominic and Micah to share some of the things we've been up to this year so far, and then our colleague and friend Sarah Lutman will be sharing out the preliminary report, draft, final report from the assessment program that I'll tee up. So briefly, what I'll share is, last year we saw a real need to reimagine our work, ourselves, our organization for the next decade. We felt a need to begin to, like so many others across the country coming out of the pandemic have been working on, to better align our work with the challenges, opportunities we have today going forward into the future. And Sarah, would you mind muting yourself, my love? Thank you very much. I was getting distracted because I'm reading off such small font today. And this summer, we kicked off a plan to assess each of the areas of work that we've been doing through our current strategy. So our work doing aggregation of digital materials from across the country, our work providing ebook solutions, and our work convening library leaders. So what we decided to do was to start with our hallmark program, the work aggregating digital material. And we kicked off a review of an assessment of that work this fall. Sarah today will share out the conclusions of that process. And we'll publish that. I anticipate that we'll publish that next month. Without stealing from Sarah's part of the report, I will share that we have two conclusions. We're drawing two conclusions from that work. One, that the work we've been doing, that we've all been doing together for over the last 10 years, is having a real impact and is needed now as much as ever. Second, in order for that work to really flourish and to grow and to serve up the needs that we have today and into the future, we made the decision that can't live and thrive within a small nonprofit such as what DPLA is. So that leads us up to what we're working on now. So earlier this month, we launched a search to find a new and vibrant and durable home for that work that we've worked so hard together to bring to the fore. Our goal is to find a structure and a home and a set of actors who will expand on what we've started, that will result in increased use of our collections, growth in the collections, a greater array of partnerships, and generally more impact, right, for that work. Parallel to that, we're in the process of raising what will be a multi-million-dollar fund that will undergird that work and support it into the future. I'll share a couple notes right now about the process that we're taking on for that work. We launched, and maybe again, Suzanne or someone who has the link, a couple weeks ago, we launched a form for initial expressions of interest that window is open until Tuesday, and we have a so the two-stage process starts with thank you, Michael, the initial expressions of interest, which are meant for folks to be able to share at an early stage that they might be interested in this work. Full applications to an RFP will be due in May. And our goal is to have the winner selected by July and to be able to launch the project in its new home in early 2025. We are literally, as we speak, writing out that RFP and designing the structure for that process. I will highlight, some of the aspects that the qualities that we will be looking for, that we are thinking about at the outset, based on the work we've been doing, right? So we're going to be looking for the ability to support and sustain this work into the future. Commitments, robust commitments to the values of equity and inclusion that have grounded this work. Experience with collaboration and collaborative models, and the ability to work with large scale digital infrastructure. So that's that's a big part of the work we're taking on through this quarter. We can share more about that. Dominic is running office hours also if you have individual and one-on-one questions you want to take on. And that's an exciting part of what the rest of the spring and the rest of the year is going to be like for us. And in the meantime, the work continues. We're doing the work, and maybe that's an opportunity. Let me maybe pass. We didn't decide who was going to go next, but so Dominic or Micah, whoever grabs the mic first, you're up. Okay.
Is it me?
Who's coming on?
I'll
Dominic, you chose the mic.
Yeah, you kind of segued into me. Yeah, so, and I wanted to, before we kind of get into Sarah's updates on the Cultural Heritage Program and the Q&A later, I wanted to just take a minute to really spotlight and lift up the work the network has been doing. And I took a look back, we had our last public board meeting in October, and which was right when I first came on board as Director of Community Engagement. And at that time, we were really kicking off a fall where we had 4 other public events. So I just wanted to quickly summarize all the things that we've really accomplished in those last few months. So Digital Curation Task Force had an event wrapping up their work and gave a presentation on their and published their digital curation matrix and guidelines. Our partners from the Ohio Digital Network and the Columbus Metropolitan Library presented to share their experiences with the Wikimedia pipeline, in which they uploaded over 300,000 digital assets to Wikimedia Commons that summer. We also had a presentation that was put together by the Outreach and Assessment Working Group on teaching and learning with DPLA resources, and discussing using the Open Educational Resources Commons. And finally, a webinar from the Metadata Working Group presenting their Metadata Best Practices Report, which was the culmination of a year of work from that working group. And then this year we started off, we kicked it off, strongly with a well-attended workshop on Open Refine by Helen Baer from the Metadata Working Group, and discussing or teaching about a tool for data remediation and reconciliation. That's a really technical topic, and we still had over 100 people in attendance and a lot of enthusiasm for that. We had a presentation after that from the National Archives on their citizen archivist work, which we published. We gave and published the recording of just a few weeks before the USA Today published a really detailed profile on that same program. So we kind of scooped to them. And then John actually spoke at the South by Southwest panel titled Safeguarding Our History, Libraries and Inclusive Stories, about our digital equity project, the outcomes. And I also, together with Angela Stanley and Evan Robb from our network, we spoke on a panel just a few weeks ago in Columbus at the Public Library Association on our Wikimedia pipeline. So we're still, continuing strongly with programming, and in fact, right now we're in the middle of one of our most exciting, at least to me, programs ever, and the one that we've gotten, some of the most interest from our community ever, which is our metadata working groups, practical applications to reparative description workshop series. So just last week on Thursday, we held the first of these workshops, which was representations of gender and sexuality in metadata, with several invited speakers, and we've already put out the recording on our events page for that if you're interested. We had over 300 people in attendance to that event, and we have similar numbers of signups for the next two events that are coming. So a lot of excitement around this topic of reparative description. This Thursday will be the second in the series, and that will be local contexts, tools for supporting Indigenous rights and interests and collections, with the help of the Right Statements Working Group, which has been working a lot on traditional knowledge labels and related topics. So that's this Thursday, April 25th. And the final workshop in that series will be special projects in reparative and inclusive description on Friday, May 10th. And then we will also on Thursday, May 23rd, the Right Statements Working Group will be giving an introduction to standardized right statements. So a general introduction to the topic, which we haven't done more than a couple of years. So that's all of the events and programming, which is a lot, and there's been a lot of interest, and more people than ever signed up. Certainly the most we've had outside of the pandemic, when everybody was home and tuned into every webinar they could find. So outside of events, I've had a lot of great connections with folks on the ground in our network, and like John said, we're still doing the work. Some examples are just that we've One Hub, Harvard Library, we've helped to have their first harvest in over 4 years and get back on a regular schedule. We actually have 2 more hubs this year that we're expecting to have their first harvest, some new hubs joining still. And as you can see from all of this, the working groups are still dedicated to the work, and the Network Council has been meeting regularly still. And so our DPLA hub network, I think, has really remained resilient through all this uncertainty. And I'll wrap up by just pointing out, which you will know if you visit dp.la, that we are currently at 49,882,649 items in our aggregation. So we will be hitting 50 million soon, and that's really a testament to all the work that our network has done over the last years. And like John said, we will be having, I will be hosting office hours. So for everyone in the network that's still that's doing this work, the office hours will be on the second Tuesdays of the month. So the next one is next May 14th at 2 p.m. Eastern. So feel free, you don't need to sign up for anything. You can find the link on our events page. Feel free to and we also just put out an announcement on our blog. So feel free to join in if you want to just meet me, or have a specific technical question or some big picture question, whatever it is you want to talk about. And so I'll hand it over to Micah.
Thanks, Dominic. Exciting work. So I think everyone on this call probably knows that a part of DPLA's work is supporting access for library patrons by helping libraries serve digital content, ebooks, and audiobooks more effectively through a library-driven platform they can control. So most of our work is on the Palace project, which is really the only library-driven platform of that kind in the country, and supporting the Palace Bookshelf, which is our free collection of content, digital books curated by librarians on our curation core team. So today, by way of update, I wanted to share a little bit about two other projects, a little bit to the side of that, but very much related in terms of mission. I just dropped a blog post to one of them, which is we convened a group before PLA on the Tuesday before Public Library Association conference of indie publishers and libraries. And I think this was the first time a convening like this has really ever happened in terms of something that was specific to independent publishers. We did this convening in partnership with the Independent Publishers Caucus, which is a small kind of industry advocacy group specifically for independent publishers. And it was really well received. We had over 100 participants. We were sold out in a really cool little venue. It was about a third publishers, a third libraries, and then other kind of thought leaders. And, really heard a lot of enthusiasm from participants who wanted another day or wanted to do it again soon. And I think that what really popped out for me and for many of the participants is how aligned independent publishers and libraries really are in terms of their mission. Many of these presses are actually nonprofits, and they really feel like kindred spirits for libraries. They're all about getting people to books. We had a fabulous keynote from this author and researcher, Rebecca Giblin, and she talked about this as sort of book people saving books, and that really set the tone for the whole event. Both the librarians and the indie publishers there were definitely book people. Some of the other insights that really jumped out are, just that libraries can really shape and drive demand for books and how important that is. I think that's been a evergreen theme, but it really jumped out in the context of these indie presses who are competing with much larger organizations to call attention to their fabulous titles. And the libraries can really be a place for discovery and to drive awareness of important books, but that they need more channels for publishers to make recommendations and help them pick which books to spotlight. So we're working together with our partners to try to facilitate more of that, to help libraries really be that place for discovery of books that patrons may not otherwise find. And related to that, I think it was really important. It came out, that libraries are very focused on sourcing diverse books, diversity defined very broadly, and that indie publishers are really the ones that have most stepped up to fill that need in terms of providing diverse titles by a wide range of authors and subject matters. At the same time, we heard that the publishers really need to know more about what's happening in libraries. So they need more information about what libraries actually pay, how they circulate books, and what's circulating. And so that's something we're also trying to work on. These independent publishers and libraries, I think we really found a lot of common ground, which has been DPLA's mission to find the ways that we can support each other and find win-wins. We think, publishers and authors and creators in general need to get paid, and libraries are willing to do that as long as they can pay a fair price. We have seen through this discussion that publishers like this, smaller publishers, are really willing to offer library-friendly models, and we plan on rolling out more and more of those with independent publishers, including core source publishers that partner with Ingram for distribution, who are going to be making our 4 preferred license models available. So if you're interested in the IndieLib conference or just snippets of it, you can find the reporting here. I dropped in chat. And if you would like to register your interest for next year, we don't know for sure when it will be next year, but based on the feedback survey, it will probably be on the Thursday before ALA. That seems to be the event that the most people are traveling to. So I think that's June 26th next year. So there, that second link is an interest form. It just basically gives us your email, and we can let you know as next year's event becomes planned. And we're exploring sort of other ways to keep the conversation going. So the next project I just wanted to give a brief update on, I'm sure everyone is aware of, is our project called the Banned Book Club, which offers free access to books that have been banned in the specific locations where they've been banned. So this is through the Palace app. Palace, patrons can download the Palace app, and if they're in one of the cities or counties where books have been banned, it's 260 locations nationwide, they can log in and read banned books for free. So we have nearly 1,000 titles in the collection. And one of the things that we promised as we launched the Banned Book Club is that we keep it up to date. So every month we are reviewing, or not every month, sorry, every quarter we're reviewing data which has been aggregated by PEN America, and looking at all the books that have been challenged, and any books that have been banned, which we're understanding as books that have actually been removed from a library shelf, we're adding to the collection. And then we're also lighting up additional geographic areas when they have implemented book bans. So I thought it was interesting. We did the first of these quarterly updates in Q4 at the end of last year. And in the most recent one, this last quarter, there are actually twice as many books challenged as the previous quarter. So this issue is definitely here to stay, at least for now. It seems more important, not less important. We added 26 locations and over 300 titles to the Banned Book Club to keep it, complete as possible with all the books that have been removed from library shelves across the country. We also hosted a really nice discussion about that at the PLA conference, which was the biggest room I've ever presented in, I think. They do this survey of what people are interested in, and it got, one of the top ranks. And so a lot of people want to be part of this discussion. That panel was hosted by Jill Bourne, one of our board members, and also included Nick Higgins from Brooklyn Public Library, who talked about their Books Unbanned project, as well as Chris Brown, who talked about the Chicago Public Library's Book Sanctuary project, and Kelvin Watson, who talked about what Las Vegas Clark County is doing to promote access. And overall, the panel just called together people who I think were really eager for more discussion about the issue of book banning, and specifically what libraries are doing to push back. I think nationally, libraries have had a pretty unified opposition to book bans and support for intellectual freedom, but it's a little bit fragmented in terms of that response. So we're going to see if we can keep, doing more to bring together libraries who are interested in being part of a network that are pushing back on book bans. But it was an exciting event to be part of and to celebrate the work that libraries have done to make sure that people have access to read what they want to read. So with that, I think I will pass this back to John.
I will pass it over but before I do, I did want to underline, just to go back to the, the first update Micah shared. For those of you that were at the IndieLib conference, it felt like a manifest. It felt very DPLA-like. And as someone, one of the DPLA board members that was there said, it felt like a DPLA fest in terms of it was a manifestation of the work we do building bridges, right? And the similar type of community opportunities that Dominic was describing with the working groups, which we've been doing virtually for the last 4 or 5 years. It felt like the energy felt really manifest of we're working to expand access to knowledge and information, right? And whether it's through ebooks or whether it's through digital collections, it really felt good. So thank you for everyone that was there, including our lyricist partners in Palace who helped make it happen. As I introduce Sarah Lutman, who's been our tag team partner and wonderful colleague for the last 6 months or so as we've run through this process, 7 months. I also wanted to underline one of the other resources we're lucky to benefit from during this process that we're rolling out is we're formulating a steering committee to help advise the decisions we're going to make in terms of finding a new home. And so I noticed several of the folks who we've reached out to ask me part of that committee meeting are on this call. So thank you. We'll be sharing up more details about the committee and the process and the RFP in the weeks ahead after the initial expression of interest close next week. So with that, Sarah Lutman, I'm going to pass the camera and the microphone over to you.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. I have a very brief number of slides as an update for, let's see, did that work? Yes. So first of all, greetings, everybody. Good to be here. And also, I didn't know some of the things we just heard in the update, so that was interesting too. Just to remind everybody what I've been doing for the past few months, we have had an assessment process for the cultural heritage work, which began with document review, background reading, interviews with 50 library leaders, including people in the network, partners, field observers. I've had ongoing meetings with the leadership and staff team at DPLA, ongoing almost literally. I mean, we have a running Slack channel that's pretty active. I've had a board task force, open community meetings, board and network council updates, some subsequent small group discussions, and then the preparation of a final report, which in this slide deck says release before April 30th, but John just said sometime this week or next. It's all but finished. It hasn't been through a proofreader yet, but it should be coming soon. And this assessment had some key findings, just a real opportunity for thoughtful reflection on what has been accomplished, and an outpouring of expression of enthusiasm for the cultural heritage work and all the ways it could be built upon, and a sense at the grassroots level. And by grassroots here, a lot of the libraries consulted are quite large organizations, but among libraries, a sense of momentum for the work and a strong belief in its importance. And as we've heard from Dominic, the huge interest in thinking about the realization of the importance of racial equity in the work and ways for the centering equity commitment of the organization to be more pronounced. And also people saying we don't want to just collect things, we want to see them used. Examples of that being primary source sets, the Wikimedia partnership, and other efforts toward building usage that were highlighted. But really, interviewees shared their sense that DPLA as an entity is falling short of realizing the full potential of its own effort here, and that the external context for the work is substantially changed. DPLA had a significant amount of startup funding, but that has long since been depleted. The membership revenue that was instituted some years ago is significant, but it's insufficient to either sustain and, more importantly, to scale the work. And that as a general rule, funders are oriented toward project and initiative support versus operating support. And so DPLA, despite its efforts, has not been successful in raising the operating support needed to fill the gap between membership revenue and an ideal funding base. And further, just as consultants, we see this both need and opportunity to reassess and reinvent being paralleled across the entire nonprofit sector, and that organizations are looking for all kinds of new paths forward, new roles and opportunities to pursue, and new ways of working. In fact, I spent my whole morning with an organization that is working on its sunsetting plan. So they're trying to figure out the most creative way they could possibly go about doing it. This is happening all over the place, and we need to see that as a creative inspiration and also some guidelines for what to do next. So the ultimate conclusion is, as John expressed, this deep desire for growing and extending the work, but the thought that the work deserves and will benefit from a home that already has the capacities for sustainability that it will take DPLA a long time to build as a small nonprofit, and that this transition will allow the collections to reach the next level that we all imagine. So as has already been announced, this transition is underway. We've created an intake process for organizations who want to express interest in taking on the continuation. They're asking really interesting questions, some of which we can't really answer because there are no answers to it yet. The deadline for expressing interest is at the end of this month, and we are working with the DPLA staff to build out an RFP for what to include in a formal application that will be available to the most promising candidates. And this is my last slide, so I'm going to stop screen sharing, but I don't know if there are any questions for me or the DPLA team before we move on to, I think discussion is the final agenda item today. Yeah.
I'm gonna hand the mic back over to Felton, and I see a bunch of our board members in the room as a starting point, but thank you, Sarah. Felton Thomas, if you're around, I'll give you the mic back and we could, or kick off any questions that folks have.
Yeah, I think we're just open for folks to put things in the Q&A and see.
There is something in the Q&A already. Yeah. Can you share how many expressions DPLA has already received? You mean you think some people put their expression in before the deadline? John, you might want to answer that one.
John, that's a question for you, John.
I mean, correct. No one's put anything in before the deadline. I expect the deadline is next Tuesday. Like that's when they'll come in. I've talked to several folks who are working on them, right? And so, I mean, I think the headline is we're going to have some exciting ideas to take on, to interrogate. And again, you know, the way we've structured this is that, you know, the first batch of folks will raise their hand and will come through by next week, and then we'll go to a number of those folks and ask deeper, you know, more thorough questions, give them more time to answer those, and we'll share out those questions as and when we finalize them.
Okay.
And if you're considering one and you haven't talked to Dominic or me yet, feel free to reach out. And I think most of you that are probably considering, you've talked to us, but we're around and happy to field questions. We try to keep those preliminary questions as simple and lightweight as possible, but also know folks have got questions, and so we're happy to help.
Plan B is, the second question is there a plan B for metadata aggregation, meaning if no other organization steps forward to take it on?
There's not a plan B, because I don't think that's not gonna be the case. We've gotten pretty clear feedback that folks are stepping forward, and we'll have multiple people to consider.
More questions, comments, thoughts?
I should say that as part of this strategic review that I kicked off, in addition to the wonderful help that Sarah's given us, in addition to the feedback of dozens of you, many of you are here. One of the things we did as a board is we set up 2 committees to have some of these kind of ad hoc committees. So one group to help us think through the various permutations and strategic implications and questions relating to the cultural heritage transition, and another group to help us think through a more nascent yet no less pertinent conversation about where we should be in terms of our ebooks work. And so anyway, partly that comes to mind because Elaine turned on her camera, and Elaine's been a key part of the first group, and several of you. Anyway, so thank you to the board that's been a part of those conversations and this process that Sarah and I and Dominic touched on in large part is been, informed by and driven by those conversations that we've been having in the last weeks and months.
Yeah, I know that there's several board members on the call. Beyond Elaine, there's Joe Lucha, John, Laura DeBonis, Marsha Walker McWilliams. So if there are other board members who have thoughts or that they wanted to add or about any of the committee work, please don't hesitate. I see, Elaine, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say that it's been a very thoughtful process, what we've gone through. And so I'm really grateful for, the updates from Micah and Dominic and John. And I don't really have anything to add other just to say the process has been thoughtful. I'm really looking forward to digging down and more of the, ins and outs in the coming months. But this is, I feel like we're on a really good foundation moving forward. So I feel really optimistic about the future.
Thanks, Elaine. And there are 2 more thoughts. One is a comment that this is a heavy lift. I think you need to have a plan B in place. And then the second is a question: what is DPLA as an organization after aggregation? Will it continue to collaborate on the cultural heritage work like they support ebooks work on the Palace Project in collaboration with lyricists?
Yeah, so I'll take that's a great question. I think, as I said at the outset, the motivating factor for these processes that we've been driving through is the fact that we're, doing our planning for 2025, and we're running projects that we stood up in 2010, basically, began to set up in 2010. And we've had a desire, as Sarah said, that's kind of in the air right now, right? Especially, I feel like, as a small, digitally focused organization in this space where a lot of our partner institutions are 100 years old or older, to ask ourselves, how has the world changed? The differences in the technologies that folks are using and how they're using them, our political and social changes. Let's intentionally have a conversation about what that work should be like, right? And so you've just heard today, most of the output of that first deep dive and examination that we did over the fall. We'll do a similar, though probably not, frankly, as lengthy or as deep conversation about our ebooks work. I mentioned this separate DPLA board committee that's gotten together a couple of times now. What are the needs and opportunities, right? If the strategy that we're operating on, which is strategy.dp.la, has been in place since 2019, and you'll notice that it's got a tagline of through 2022. So we're well past that. So that's the conversation we're having, and those are good questions. I will say, as I hope was clear, both from the staff updates and of just, thinking about where we are, that this notion of the need for, actively ensuring that the digital context leads to more access and not less, that still feels very present. And this need for the practices of curating information through technology feel more acute every day, just, as we live our lives as ourselves as citizens and as parents and as professionals. And so how exactly that plays out, I don't know yet. And that's a thing that, as you can imagine, we'll be talking a lot more about in the weeks and months ahead.
So there was another question, and I think this is a really important question for us to speak to, is can you please say a little bit more about the pressure points you experienced as a small organization that led to the new strategy?
Ooh, pressure points. Well, since I think that might be tied to something Sarah said, Sarah, do you feel, can you, at like a broad level, you don't need to speak for DPLA, but as you've worked with, I don't know how many nonprofits you're working with right now broadly, then I can speak specifically to sort of the DPLA context as a small nonprofit in a space that doesn't have a lot of small nonprofits.
Yeah, I'll just say it's kind of classic for the funding community to provide significant, sometimes extravagant startup funding without a commitment to sustain or continue support. Somebody could probably write a book about this, but at least a very good article where the initial idea is compelling and the funding comes like naturally based on the idea, but that over time, what I would call repeatable revenue potential is what becomes really important. And DPLA in particular, but I think organizations in general have trouble, depending on the scale of the startup, ever reaching the level that the startup funding provided. That's a big generalization, but we see it play out frequently.
And I really appreciate the question. I mean, I think, and it can be a long answer over drinks. I think one, in addition to what Sarah shared, I will say, as won't be news to any of you, right? Over the last few years, we've seen a lot of turnover just among staff, among leaders in the space generally, right? I can think of some of the more active members of our community, several of whom have left the field, right? And so I think that is a basic function of where we are as a field and as a society. That sort of human turnover is one of the things we've been working through, and sort of the need to just refresh and reorient. So I think maybe I'll mention two other kind of, maybe not pain points, but at least points of context that are real, part of the realness that we're dealing with. One relating to what Sarah shared is very pragmatically, our funding by and large, with a couple of notable exceptions, has been project-based support, right? And so that means our ability to make decisions or to take on projects or tasks outside of specific projects that we've been lucky to been funded to take on, we're constrained. And then I think second, really, that thing that a point of tension or a point of opportunity for an organization like ours in the sort of way we've come into the creation in this space at this moment in time, is the balance to stand up new projects, like being part of what's become Palace and being part of standing up, our national aggregation service. But also, we weren't designed to do one project or two projects, right? And the rapidity of change and disruption in this space, and for instance, thinking about what large-scale AI efforts mean and how we deal with that as a field, and as thinking about both for our workforces and on the user side, are questions that we get asked often, and we haven't had the space or opportunity to think, as one example, right? But sort of what are the next 3 or 4 big opportunities that are here now that we need to brace for? And conversations. I think one of the exciting things about the idea of being able to get into physical space, like those of you who are able to attend the meeting in Columbus, that Micah referenced to, is that it leads to a lot of connections that we often can't get to if we're just in Zoom space. So I would say actually the pandemic itself and the constraints the pandemic imposed across the board has also been an obvious pain point.
Yeah. And I'll add into that. I mean, any of us that are on boards in our cities or organizations that we are working with have seen a number of them be put in a place where they're just not able to raise enough to pay for staffing. It's just simple as that, right? Because the funds that are coming in are just not bringing in enough money. More and more nonprofits and fewer dollars that are going to these nonprofits. So it's just more of a challenge. Question, how much revenue is generated by the ebook programming versus cultural heritage aggregation?
I do not have those specific numbers at my fingertips. Let me see. Let me go back to the question so I can grok it, and I don't want to say anything incorrect. Where is it? Generated by. I would say, we're the bulk of the revenue that we operate with are project-based grants. And right now, and we're working to, as Sarah alluded to, trying to grow that pie. On the earned, in addition to the grants that we serve, we receive, and again, I don't have the number in front of me, but we can share it out, a slice of revenue from our partnership in the Palace project, which goes towards subsidizing the work of our work around ebooks that you heard about. And we receive membership dollars from our membership, from the digital aggregation service. But I don't have those off at my fingertips. I would say, yeah, let me get those, and maybe by the time we finish this, I could pull it up, unless anyone's already pulled it up while I've been talking.
And so, and I think these are coming in together. Like, what are the specific components you are able to grow inside the organization? And also says, just coming out to let everyone know I'm deciding to run a small nonprofit with startup dollars, wondering how not to fall off a cliff once that ends. And yeah, I mean, that's the challenge. I think the key is how much the startup dollars you can get. What are the startup dollars you can get? How can you create some form of large endowment to always create more funding that, from that? And how can you get a longer sustainable period of time from the donors, just not from a startup standpoint? Sarah, you probably know more about this than anyone, having worked with so many organizations that are in the same situation, seeing where they've gotten in trouble. But those are the answers that I see from the nonprofits that are able to survive. It is, they start with a lot of funding, which gives them a big kind of starting point to kind of move from. And also they work with a commitment from those organizations to stay with them over a certain period of time. But any other thoughts?
The other way is they start super scrappy and never get big. They
Yes.
never. But I think in some ways what it comes down to is that the scale of what DPLA was created to do is far vaster than even the startup funding was in the beginning. And it's a generations long project that, just the idea that it could somehow have startup and then sustainability, barring government support or some sort being attached to bigger infrastructure, is just a pretty complicated thought in 2024. And maybe it was born of a different kind of internet age where the mentality was just completely different. And many funders had a sort of venture mindset that has not proven to work well in nonprofit sector. What do you
Why do you
think,
look?
John?
Why do you look?
We're
Why do you
having
look
this.
at me when you say that, Sarah
Yeah.
Lutman? So my previous job in part was helping to support a lot of startup digital nonprofits in various seats. George, I'm happy. Yes, it's exciting, and there are lots of folks, small digital nonprofits, who I'm sure you've talked to many of them. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to be part of any conversation with you at any point. And I'm excited for what you're doing at Flickr Foundation. And this could be a really deep, conference session. I will say, going back to the question about challenges that we face as an organization, I do think the fact is, by and large, one of the challenges is, I don't know if you're seeing this, George, is we are a small nonprofit in a field where most of the entities, the notion of, year-to-year budgets is not, they're obviously everyone's got, have to come up with budget, but being a small organization among large organizations, just different. And often we have to do a better job at translating what the challenges and opportunities are, because it's just so different. Relatedly, I think, I don't have the precise numbers for this year or last year, but the answer to that question about the earned income, the earned income we get from ebooks sales and the earned income we get from membership is again, depends on the year, but they're roughly equivalent. We book between $200,000 and $300,000 each year from membership funds, and as well as from ebook sales. And they're different, very different contexts and very different types of dollars. But happy to share more about that.
So 2 more questions for us. Can you share who, what organizations are slated to contribute to the endowed fund?
No, I can't at this point. It's a lot. There are several, and when we have clearance to share out what funders are going to support it, we will share it out. But right now, we don't have that finalized to share.
Okay, and how much money over the next 5 years does DPLA
That's a
need
great
to operate
question.
cultural heritage aggregation as it runs
That
now?
is a good question. I will say that for the basis of this transition that we're teeing up and that we walked through, we're targeting, and to type that previous question, that set of funders that we're talking to, our target is to secure a $5 million fund that could serve as the basis, really serve as an endowment, so that could spin off up to $250,000 a year to serve as the basis to kind of fund core operations. As we're having conversations with the potential partners and with the funders, right, our sense is, and as we continue to grow and expand the work, that the permanent home will also add to that. And whether that's through FTEs or equivalencies or raising future funds or applying direct funds, and questions about what sort of resources and contributions folks can bring to the table will be part of the RFP process. So that's to say that we are not running this process of saying, here's the 5-year plan, can you come fill it? What we're saying is, here's what the work is, here's the opportunity we have with the support of all of us that have been doing the work and of the fund. How do you want to execute on those possibilities?
And I think this will be our last question or comment. Those are just mismatched motivations and models here. Project-based sucks. How do we start framing these digital archives in the same way that 19th century collections, which were established with endowments?
That's a deep question, George. I don't know. We're trying.
I would
Sarah,
just,
you have any?
well,
Yeah,
just like in case you were wondering whether museums are having a picnic with loads of money right now, that's not the case either. So I was actually thinking it's like time to write an article about against the idea of sustainability being something that you seek versus something that you practice.
Mm.
I mean, and I will say, just to, to land on, a genuine optimistic note. I mean, I think, and maybe you alluded to this at the outset, Felton. I think we're at an extraordinary opportunity, right? Where we've built and nurtured a thing over the last 10 years. And now we have a set of folks, both inside of our field and outside of our field, who say, this is an important thing. Let's help it get to the next level, right? And at a time when so many institutions across the different sectors and fields are being disrupted, I think we're in a really good place and a really good opportunity to build a future and to actively be able to imagine what we want the next 10, 20 or beyond years to be for this work.
Yeah, and I think Jared says, is it time for pundits to start spending their endowments? Yeah, that is very true. But I think as we close, I think this is a great opportunity to talk to all of you about the fact that we're going to keep putting this information out there. We're going to continue to find ways to communicate with you about what we're doing and how we're moving forward. John, if you have any additional things that are going to be, as far as meetings that are going to be able to communicate where we are as of April 30th and after that, I think we'll make sure that the general community knows more about that. All right, well, thanks everyone. Great questions, great comments. Thank you, Sarah, of course, for joining us today, Micah, and everyone else. Thanks for joining us. All right. We'll see you soon.